Good evening. Hello. Welcome to the Poudre School District's meeting tonight on long-range facility planning recommendations. I'm Claire Bouchard with Slate Communications, and I'll be helping with the questions this evening. The purpose of this evening is to hear the details of the long-range plans for facilities in Poudre School District. The superintendent's recommendations will be shared tonight in detail, and questions will be addressed from the audience. I'm not an employee of Poudre School District, but rather a community member here to help keep the conversation going and make sure that we answer as many questions as possible. As I said before, the superintendent will share details of her plan here shortly. While she's speaking, we ask you to grab some paper or note cards from the back, jot down your questions or comments, and then we'll be collecting them at the end of the presentation. We're streaming live, and those with questions at home can send them to info@poudreschools.org. All questions are recorded, and the answers to those questions will be posted online at poudreschools.org. Did I miss anything, or are we ready to get going?
I think that's it. Let's see if I'm working here. Can you hear me? There I am. So welcome. I know that the cameras and the mics and everything makes it feel a little bit more formal than it needs to be, but that's for the purpose of being able to stream it and also record it so that you can go back and watch it again later if you were so interested you wanted to do it again. We would like you to ask as many questions as you have. So it's not one question per person who's here. So does everyone know where the stacks of papers are or how to get more? Where are they? Danielle's got them. Okay, right there. So feel free, you can raise your hand and she'll bring you another one, or just take a handful. At the end of my presentation, we'll take all questions we get until we just run out of time. In most of the presentations so far, I take approximately 20 minutes to give you the basic ideas of what is in the plan, and then we spend the whole rest of the time with question and answer. Okay? So don't be shy about your questions. That's why we're here. So let me do a couple introductions first. We have, I believe, one board member, Kathy Kipp, there you are. And any other board members? Oh, is that Nate? Hi, Nate. Nate is also here, Nate Donovan. So we have two current sitting board members, and then we have some members of our Community Facilities Advisory Committee. These are community members who've been working alongside of us and have developed their own opinions about what our plan is. And we have Len Rourke, there's Len. We have Gary Ozella, who's one of our co-chairs. There's Gary, and right in front of him is Yvonne Myers, our other co-chair. And then we have, I think that may be it, from our Facilities Advisory Group. Mary, there you are. Sorry, I have stage lights in my eyes. And if anyone else that you need to know comes during the presentation before we start questions, we'll do additional introductions. So staff that's here to help me do the presentation and answer the questions you may have in as much detail as we can. I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hi, my name's Dave. Hello, my name's Dave Montoya. I'm the Executive Director of Finance.
Good evening. My name is Edie Eccles, and I am the Assistant Superintendent for Secondary Schools.
Hi, I'm Pete Hall, Executive Director of Operations.
Hi, I'm Todd Lambert, Assistant Superintendent for the Elementary Schools.
All right, well, let's get started. So the big idea that is causing all of this work and planning is that we are growing. So if you live anywhere near here, you know that this entire region is growing. There's a lot of approved housing yet to be built. There's a lot of people moving in, and we feel it in the schools. We are getting more kids. So for the past couple years, we have gotten approximately 500 new students new to the district each year, this year and last. This year we were just under 500. Last year we were closer to 500 exactly. We are projected to continue growing at that rate. So if you think about 500 students, that is approximately the size of an elementary school in our district. So we are adding enough kids for an elementary school every year. Now, thankfully, those students are not all in one age group, they're not all elementary, and they don't all live in one neighborhood. So we're spreading them out because they're moving in and they're living in different areas and they are in different age groups. But they are primarily in 2 regions of the district. And if you look at the map of our district, that's the map of Poudre School District, that circle over there is the area that you think of as being the school district, which is primarily the Fort Collins area. But we also go north through Wellington and all the way up to the Wyoming border. We also go west to the Continental Divide. And so we even include little bits and parts of Windsor. We include Timnath, and we include even little bits of Loveland. So we are growing, and if you think about our district and where the highway is, you can kind of see I-25 there. Our district includes a swath of land on the other side of I-25 that goes all the way up. And that is where you'll see a lot of the growth that's happening, a lot of new neighborhoods coming in. And so as a district, when we feel the crowdedness in our schools, we primarily feel it on the southeast side of the district and on the north side. So the Wellington community is getting very crowded in their schools, and all of the region down here on the southeast side are getting crowded. And the crowding, it has just begun. It is projected to increase and continue. So we have worked for a year, or a little over a year now, to develop an update to our long-range facilities plan. As a district, we always have a long-range facilities plan, but we try to update it approximately every 10 years or so. We didn't quite make it 10 years this time because the growth is coming so fast. We wanted to jump in and get busy on it earlier. And so we're looking at some new schools and 1 additional athletic facility, a small addition to transportation facilities. We're looking at ongoing facilities improvements to all of our existing schools, and a small mill levy override to support the opening of the new schools. And I will tell you more about those in just a moment. So one of the big ideas to keep in mind is that we believe that we can fund these projects with no tax rate increase. Now, that is not to say that your taxes will not go up. Your taxes are already going up because your assessed valuation is going up. That's not under our control. But we do believe we can fund all of this construction improvement and keep your tax rate the same with voter permission. And we're going to explain that in more detail in a moment. So what schools are we talking about? We're talking about a new elementary school on the far southeast side of the district, all the way down just north of the ranch. And that is in our district down there, okay? So a whole elementary school, which if we keep to the timeline we have, will open already with approximately 400 kids in it on day 1. So that's the amount of growth that's happening over there. We're looking at a high school, in what order are these? At the Prospect site. The Prospect site is in the Fort Collins boundary, but it is on the east side of I-25 on Prospect, just north of Prospect. It's a 100-acre site that the district owns and has owned for quite a long time, so it's available for us to put a school there. 100 acres is a perfect size for building a full-size high school. So we're looking at taking the Fossil Ridge building and putting another one over there. That is amazing when you think about it, that we're going to add high schools to our district. But our high schools at this point in time are the most crowded of all of our schools and are projected to continue to be more crowded as big classes of kids move through the system. Now, it will not have all high schoolers in there when it opens. We are also overcrowding at our middle schools, particularly in the southeast side, and so we're projecting to open it with a middle school sharing the building. When Fossil opened, they shared the building with Kennard for 2 years. I've spoken with many parents who experienced that, and they were surprised and happy at how well it went. In that case, they chose to put the middle schoolers on the second floor, high schoolers on the first floor. We think this community will have the opportunity to make those decisions for themselves about how to best share the building. Now, in that case, they only shared the building for 2 years, and almost immediately the new construction was beginning on the middle school. We do not believe we would build that middle school to move them out that fast. We do think that they will share the building longer than just 2 years. We are talking about doing the same thing up in the Wellington area. We do not own a piece of land up there that we believe is in the right location for a Wellington high school. We are planning to use the same Fossil model, but smaller with one less wing, because even in full build out, we do not think they're going to be quite as big as a high school. And then Wellington Middle School is a very old building that really doesn't lend itself to being remodeled. It's on a little postage stamp of land, so the land itself is too small, and it's very old and expensive to remodel, and you don't get much for your money. So our idea is to also have them share the Wellington building, and that will be interesting as well. Our plan is to have both communities decide how they want to share those buildings. We do believe the Wellington building is Wellington community is going to share that building longer than the Prospect community will. We think the growth is coming in. It's coming in, but it's coming in slower, at a slower rate. One of the things these two buildings do is they give us flexibility, since making projections is not an exact science. And because there are thousands of homes already approved, many of which have started to build, it could come very fast, or it could slow down and not come in as fast. But we need them now, and we also understand, and I'll talk to you about money in a minute, the longer we wait, the more expensive it gets. So then Zach Elementary, down here in the southeast part of the district, we're adding an addition onto Zach, including some extra rooms and also adding some infrastructure to increase the total capacity of that building to 600 students. We believe that by the time they are filled up to 600, their community will be maxed out in terms of growth. We think that's a good solid number. They don't need a whole nother school in that region. The athletics complex is basically, the idea is another French field. So if you have a student who plays competitive sports in a field sport, they often do all their regional play at French Field. We believe as a district it makes sense to have a regional stadium rather than have every single school have a very expensive stadium for play and for practice. But as we grow and as we spread out, we also don't think it's practical. It's already not practical now to only have the one field. It's very difficult to get time scheduled, and it's already crowded without adding all these new high school students that are coming in. So we would like to add a second regional play field. We are designing that at this point to be significantly smaller and less expensive than French Field, so about 2,000 seats less than French Field has. And then transportation, we tried intentionally to focus only on the growth in our existing schools, and so we have tried not to add any expense that is a central office type expense, but we do have one critical need that we just could not in good conscience keep out of this request, and that is a small transportation maintenance bays for servicing our buses. So our school bus fleet now stands at about 175 approximately buses. All of the new ones we have been buying for quite some time are all the super long buses because they are more economical to operate. And we do not have a single maintenance bay in the district that will hold the long buses. And we do not have a lift that will lift any of them. And we do not have wells to work under them. So we're servicing a fleet of 175 buses by crawling around underneath the buses. And we just need to not do that anymore. So the only central service here that we're including in this is to add, I believe it's 6 bays that are properly equipped for our bus fleet. So the process for opening new schools would be that the small mill levy that we're also going to ask for the operational costs of opening the schools would allow us to hire the key staff a year ahead of time. That's the best way to open, particularly a high school, because we can hire the leadership team, however many people that turns out to be, and begin to meet with the parents and the kids who are going to go to that school a year ahead of time, make some critical decisions about what type of programming the school will have when it opens, what are the specific interests, if there are any, of those particular families, and then spend time hiring the staff so that everybody's in line and ready to go to start the school year. And that's just critical. We also will make at that time decisions about grandfathering students, who has to go to the new school and who can finish where they are. It's our hope and our intention that juniors and seniors would be able to finish wherever they are, and that 8th graders would be able to finish. And that's what we're shooting for, that's what we're hoping for. If growth comes in at 4 times the rate we're looking at, that might not be an option, but at this point we're hoping and expecting that it will be. So our existing buildings, we are looking to spend $40 million. Did I miss the price tag? I did. Hold on, let me back up. So 313 of the 375 million would go towards the new construction, which is the lion's share of what we would ask the voters for. It is incredibly expensive to do construction now. As a comparison, when Fossil was built, it cost $54 million to build Fossil, which at the time was industry standard. It was not an exorbitant type of a building. That same building, saving money on the land because we already own it at Prospect, and saving money on architecture because we have the plans already, is now coming in with really good numbers, somewhere between $145 and $155 million. And if you work in construction, you know those are the rates. And that just goes to my point that if we choose to wait as a community and not do this now, that's okay, but it will cost more when we get down to doing it later. There is significant cost savings in acting sooner rather than later. So the lion's share, as you see, of the $375 million is for the new construction. And then $40 million for our existing buildings. We remain committed to continue to work on our existing buildings and improve them as best we can. We went through a lengthy process of prioritizing all of the projects that the occupants of the schools wanted, as well as what the facilities department said were critical needs, as well as any of the things from the engineering study around cooling the buildings that was reasonable and useful. We are not including air conditioning all the buildings in this bond. Just as an aside, the cost to do that, what came in around $84 million, which is a huge amount of money, just to air condition all of our schools. We also, I don't believe, have a community that really wants or is asking to do year-round schools. Having moved the school year by 1 week, too much opposition. I don't think having school all summer is something this community wants to do anyway. And as we did that study, one of the things we found was that the schools that are air conditioned have never used their air conditioning for more than 18 days in a school year. So that may change as we go into the future, but it just did not seem like a reasonable thing to put in this bond. But we do have some critical HVAC and improvement to air circulation systems that are working very well in some of the recent work we've done in other schools that we have included from the facilities department. We are focusing on the older schools, the ones that were built in the 60s and 70s. We have schools that are up to 100 years old in our district. It seems that the ones that were built in the 80s are still doing pretty well. It's the ones in the 60s and 70s that really need significant work, and so we have added projects based on that most critical need. Each school got at least one thing out of their top 10 list from the occupants, including charter schools. Charter schools don't have a top 10 list, but we are allocating some money for them to use as well. That money would be from the mill. Is that right? No, from the bond, not from the mill. I think I've told you those. Yep. So I'm going to turn it over at this point to Dave Montoya. Dave, I did this presentation without you. I think you would have been proud. I did pretty good 2 days ago. But our Chief Financial Officer is here, and I think it makes more sense for him to explain the financing of these bonds, why we think that we can finance all of this work without raising your tax rate, which is a critical question. So he's going to explain all of that to you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Smyser. So I've got the next couple slides, and I'm going to walk you through the financing component of this plan. This first slide that we have, thank you. The first slide that we have displayed here is actually what we currently have as annual debt service payments for our existing debt. So as you can imagine, as we've built schools in the past, we've had to take bonds out for those schools, and inside these blue bars are multiple bond issues throughout the time of the school district. And the blue bars represent the ones that are currently active in the form where we're paying principal and interest on outstanding debt. So this is our existing annual debt service payments. And one of the things that you'll notice right off is that the actual debt payments drop from 2016 to 2017. And that's one of the things that we're taking advantage of to make this plan work, is the fact that we do have 3 large pieces of debt that will be retiring, meaning that we will have fully paid them off. No different than when you take a mortgage out on your home and you pay your mortgage off, you no longer have to pay a mortgage payment, right? Bonds work very similar in the sense that school districts will go out and issue bonds to investors. Investors will turn around and give cash with the expectation and the requirement that you pay principal and interest on that cash over time. And so that's how the bonds work. And you can see that we have debt that we are going to be paying on for a number of years going out. But as that debt retires, those payments decrease over time. The last thing I want to note on this slide is there's a dotted line above. And this is an important line because this actually talks about how we're forecasting how we're going to fold this plan together. The dotted line actually represents the assessed value or the revenue that would be available if we were to continue to assess 52.63 mils on your property taxes. If you look at your current property tax statement, as I look at mine, I live in Poudre School District also, you'll note that there's 2 lines on our property tax statements. One is general fund support and the other is bond support. We're talking about the bond support here. If you add those 2 numbers up, the levy has been 52.63 mils this year and actually the year before that. So what we're proposing is that we're going to keep that 52.63 mils constant. We will not need to increase it. How does that help us? The assessed valuation is going to continue to grow in northern Colorado. So as assessed valuation grows, the revenue available given that fixed tax rate will increase also. And right now we're projecting what I would call modest increases in the assessed valuation. The most recent and finalized assessed valuation that we had actually was 15.2% across the district, of which many of us probably saw that in our property tax statements as the assessed valuation went up. So given that we have the assessed valuation growing, and it just grew at 15.2%, the forecast that we have displayed on this dotted line is more conservative than that. And in fact, you'll see that it kind of goes up and then flattens and then goes up and flattens. What's happening is the assessment only happens every 2 years. It's a 2-year cycle. So we just ended the last cycle at the 15.2% increase. The next year we are factoring in about 2% growth in assessed valuation, and that's purely going to come from new construction, so that doesn't have much to do with reassessment of property values. The second assessment cycle, though, you'll see that it kicks up a little bit. That's where we're factoring in 8% growth in assessed valuation into that next year for the next assessment cycle. I think it's important to understand that we're already halfway through that assessment cycle now. They're going to gather prices, home prices from the last year and the coming year, and that's what's going to help determine what that increase is. And knowing what the housing market's doing in the area, I believe 8% is a conservative estimate right now, given what we've seen house prices do over the last year. And keep in mind that whole year is going to be part of that assessment cycle. So how does this help? As we have this dotted line, what we're going to try to do is fill in our plan to stay under the line. And you're going to see that we're able to accomplish that with the exception of the first year. So this graph is the exact same graph that we had on the last slide, but in this case what we're doing is we're folding in the $375 million bond issue and then phasing in an $8 million override that would go to support the operations of the new buildings. So the first issue is the orange bars up above, and that would be a $250 million issue to support the new construction and the projects that were slated right at the beginning. As you go through time, and it actually would be available 3 years later, what we would do is issue the second piece of the debt, which is represented by the gray bars above, and that would be a $125 million issue at that point. And then you can see we're folding in the mill-levy override. We'd have to delay that a year, but we would be folding that in line with when the new buildings are opening up. So we're able to fold the mill-levy in and eventually get up to the $8 million over the course of 4 to 5 years in the forecast period. That's really how we're structuring this. Again, I believe the assumptions that we're using are conservative, and so and our hopes is that we will be able to exceed what we're presenting to the public today. Some may note that on the 2017 year, you can see that we aren't able to keep everything under the dotted line. That is 1 year where we're going to have to get over the hurdle or a jump until the assessed valuation comes up. The district does have bond fund balance or bond fund reserves that we're going to be able to accomplish that year until the assessed valuation catches up. Okay. So we talked about the mill-levy override above, and so and I think you saw it visually, so I won't go through the timeline there. Again, we're forecasting 4 to 5 years for that override to fully phase in. What the override would be used for, and an override is simply where a bond is where you go out and ask your public for support or property tax to support principal and interest payments. An override is very different. An override is where you go out and ask your public to provide money as far as resource or ongoing support that you can use for ongoing operational costs. So as we open these buildings, there will be a number of operational costs that we'll need to support. Some of them are outdoor services and custodial. We also will have additional transportation needs as we grow. When we open these buildings, we're going to need to hire some principals, assistant principals, things of that nature. We also need to add supports for integrated services and technology and mental health. So those are things that the mill-levy override would go toward to help support the building. The actual ongoing cost of the teachers, the paraprofessionals, and the office supplies will be delivered via our normal mechanism of student-based budgeting in the district. So we'll be keeping up with that as the students grow, and the budget would move with the students to the new sites. And then if there's any remaining dollars, of which right now we're pretty tight on the budget, but if there are remaining dollars after we get done with everything, we would intend to allocate those out to our existing schools to help with their operational costs. So there's a number of other costs that are also built into the bond program that I just want to walk through briefly so that you understand the whole package. The first one is, as you may imagine, just like when you go out and get a mortgage on your home, you have to pay a fee to the lender. It's a lender fee to be able to access the market, if you will, to be able to do the loan. Bonds are very similar. We have to pay a fee to access the market and sell bonds on the exchanges. And so right now we're forecasting that fee will be about $2 million out of the $375 million issue. We also have about $7.8 million built in to help manage the program. The program is actually where we would have staff managing the actual projects, and we'd also have consultants and things and such that would be working for architects, things like that, as you're building and constructing the buildings. There will be modification of existing facilities to accommodate more seats. So one of the things that we're looking at is being able to convert space in existing buildings to add more space for classrooms. So that's one of the items that we've been working on. And then, oh, I must have skipped a slide here. Did I? Yep, sorry about that. We've gone through these slides a couple times, so they just roll off our tongue. The project reserve, so the construction project management expense is $7.8 million. That's where I left off. And then finally, we do have an overall reserve that we have built into the program. And as Dr. Smyser had mentioned, construction costs have been escalating at a surprising rate. Industry standard is typically to keep a 3% reserve for construction projects. So we have done that here, and really it's intended to deal with the unforeseen items that we may not be anticipating in our plan, but more emphasis probably on if construction costs continue to escalate beyond the increases that we've included in the plan. Okay, and I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Smyser. Sorry, I stole one of your slides there.
That's okay. So what happens next? We are doing 6 community engagements like this one. This is our 5th out of 6. And then we will take it to the board in their April 26th board meeting. They have 2 decisions to make. We're only asking them to make one decision first. The first decision is this the right plan? At this point in time, it is staff's plan now going to the board, but the board will ask us if there's any remaining concerns or questions. We'll take as long or how many board meetings it takes to arrive at what the board votes on as the final actual long-range plan for the district. Then the next question is, should we ask the voters to pay for it now in the presidential? And so the latest they could make that decision as a yes would be August the 9th in order to get it on the ballot in time. So from the time they decide this is the plan till the time they decide to ask the voters is a window of time for them to then talk about timing. Is this the right time? Do we want to go out to the voters at a different time? Do we want to postpone this plan? We will still have it, keeping in mind that every 10 years or so we update what is our plan, what's our next plan for growth in the district. So that's the process going forward in the next few months. In the meantime, what are we doing? Well, we're experiencing limited choice in our district because we're crowded. Not in every single school, but particularly in the regions that I mentioned earlier. So we have not, at this time, changed our choice policy. Our policy lines up with state law. Choice is state law. So state law says that you do not have to go to the school where you live. You can ask to go to a different school if there's room. And our policy lines up as to who has priority over who for all of those. And that is all dependent on the fact that there's a seat available. So we're experiencing more and more parents that are concerned that they don't feel like they have choice because the schools are so crowded, there simply aren't very many seats available. And that's been a real concern to our community. That's going to continue to get more and more intense as we get more and more crowded. We're also placing modulars at buildings. We already have many modulars, and we're continuing to move more of them out to buildings to hold more kids. So if you think about a modular as 2 classrooms, typically there's a classroom in each side. If you use 25 as an approximate average for class size, every time you see one modular, think 50 kids that don't fit in the building. So if there's 2 modulars out there, that we've already got 100 kids that don't fit inside the building. And that's beginning to be more and more and more common all across the district. So we will continue to move modulars out to the schools. Let me say that they are not cheap. They cost approximately $85 $1,000 a piece to purchase. And then by the time you get them moved, located, electric run to them, situated with security issues and ramps and all the things they need, they're coming in at around $200 by the time they're done. So this is not a cheap option, but it is the only option we have at the moment. We're also maximizing all of the space that we have inside buildings. We're really examining our use of existing classrooms, and we're trying to make classrooms more usable space. If there's a room that's being underutilized, we're putting pressure on the schools and saying, I think you could put a classroom in there, and we've spent a lot of time doing that all over the district as well. And unfortunately, we're having to relocate programs from one school to another so that we can use that classroom. And early childhood is a perfect example. At elementary school, we're having to move some of our preschool programs out and put them in other places because we need those rooms for kindergarten and first grade. So as we go forward, and the crowding gets more and more intense, we're also looking at changes to athletics, having to really be careful about the use at French Field. It's getting to the point almost already where we just can't just have weekend games. We're going to have to start having midweek games, and practice time's going to have to get altered quite significantly. And if it continues, the little bit of money that we do have to continue to work on our existing buildings is going to get diverted toward modulars. And so we're going to end up being able to do less and less of the ongoing maintenance needs of our existing buildings. Over time, that will become critical. And then we may have to try and solve this problem with some boundary changes. I will say that we've really looked at that. Because the growth is so regional and is not evenly spread out, the boundary solution, what that does is it increases busing and it starts moving kids farther and farther away from home to go to school at some school somewhere else that has some seats available, which clearly is not something our parents would enjoy. And worst case scenario, if we have to go for several years, our high schools are getting so packed, they are going to be the first ones to really go into intense need mode. And we would look at the same solution that most other districts do when they can't build a new high school, which is split shifts, where kids go in the morning, half the kids go till lunch, the other half goes in the afternoon. That would be several years out, but it would be something's going to happen. These kids are still coming, and our high schools simply won't hold them all. So that would be a worst case scenario. So keep in mind, these are our 4 main issues we're hoping that you will remember. First, that the kids are moving here, whether we build schools for them or not. They're coming. We experience them every day. And we think we can do this without raising the tax rate above 52.63 mils. Every current school in the district would get something for their existing building out of this bond, and that construction costs are just continuing to increase as time goes by. So now we're going to regroup here and open up for questions. How much time do we have left? Are we, what time is it? Anybody got the time? 6 to 11. Okay, so we got plenty of time. Good. So since while you're collecting questions and sorting them into categories, let me do a few more introductions. We have one more board member who's come, Carolyn Reed. Carolyn, can you do the wave? Carolyn's come to listen to the Q&A. And then Tammy, from our head of our construction department, is here as well, Tammy Knauer. So we have one more staff member, one more board member here with us. While you're getting organized there with questions, we have our co-chairs of our Community Facilities Advisory Committee. Is there anything you'd like to comment on to the crowd? Don't have to? You'll wait for questions. All right. Okay.
Hi, everybody. I just want to make a clarification. Earlier this evening when we were introducing the program, we may have misspoke the email address for online questions. If you could please address those to info@psdschools.org, we'll be sure to get them. So thank you for that, and I apologize for any inconvenience. Okay, so we're going to look through some questions, and we'll figure out which staff needs to answer them. The first question is there a possibility to use Hughes Stadium?
Actually, that's an interesting question, right? We need a stadium, there's one over there. We discounted that and decided early in the process that we did not want to do that for a couple of reasons. The main one being it isn't what we need. It's way too big. It's one field for 30,000 people to watch a game. What we need is multiple fields, and we need one that has the seating capacity of about 4,000. So it's way more expensive. It's also in disrepair and needs a lot of work, which then we would have to invest in to bring it up to speed. So no, we don't think that would work.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Here's a question about money. Is the tax rate the same for bond only or for bond plus override?
Excellent. It is both.
Yes,
but you can fund it.
so it is both. So when we say 52.63 mils, remember I said when you look at your property tax statement, there's going to be two pieces that make that up. One is our general fund support, and the other is our bonds. Within our general fund support, we have a mill levy of 27 mils that's required under state statute. That's determined by the state legislature. And so that's what Poudre School District must assess for our formula funding from the state. And then also in there we have 4 other mill levy overrides that the voters of Poudre School District have approved in prior years. That makes up the general fund support, and then on the other side is the bond support, but the total of those is 52.63 mils.
Okay, great. Here's another funding model question. Why not use the full $375 million for deferred maintenance and use California-style Melrose funding for the new schools? In this case, an improvement district is aligned with the school attendance zone, and only those attending the school will see that bond on their property tax bills.
Can't do that here, can you?
I'm not familiar with that structure, but did you say it was in California or something like
Yes.
that? I'm not familiar with that structure. That's not how it's structured in Colorado.
We don't
In
do
Colorado, school districts are basically, the way it works in Colorado is you have really 2 choices. You can either issue bonds for new construction, or you can issue what's called COPs, certificates of participation, of which are an avenue that you would typically go down if you cannot issue bonds for whatever reason. Those are much more, they're not as easy to work with as the construction bonds. Certificates of participation also require us to put our ongoing resource toward the repayment of that debt, of which would mean drastic cuts across the district. So that is not an option that we're exploring right now.
Okay, along the same vein, funding, we're going to chat from an attendee here who asked that during the Wellington meeting earlier, there was a discussion about the entire Front Range is seeing the same unfunded growth issue, and that Thompson, St. Vrain are considering bonds, and Boulder did pass a bond last year. With at least 4 key districts seeing the same problem, are there options to work together to get the state to create a sane funding model?
That would be nice. It is true that all of us up and down this North I-25 region are all growing and all going out for bonds and looking to build new schools. You can see that growth coming in as you drive up and down the corridor. We are funded by our local taxpayers for each district. There is no construction funding that's statewide, that's distributed statewide. What was the last part of that question?
Oh, I'm sorry, I put it over here in the back. Is there an option for the state to work together to create a funding model?
I would love that. I have serious doubts that would happen because they are struggling just to fund our existing funding for just operating the schools, much less adding on the cost of all this construction for new schools for districts. Our school board and others have been very active at the legislature this year, last year, the year before, trying to get just even slight increases to our funding for schools. And this would add an enormous burden on top of that, so it's very unlikely.
Great.
I'd like to add a little bit to that too, that Dr. Smyser is exactly right, that I don't have much confidence that the legislature could figure out a solution to this, because right now, as it exists in school district budgets across the state is actually shorting school districts by about $830 million. So that was a result of the recession. Those are cuts that have not been restored. And for Poudre School District, that means about $27 million currently in our annual budget. So the likelihood of the legislators being able to fix the construction problem, I have serious doubts when they can't even fix our ongoing revenue stream. So.
Okay, another funding question that's here is, have you considered requesting marijuana tax funds?
Yes, and I'm glad somebody mentioned that question, because I think there's a lot of people who really genuinely believe that when the marijuana law passed that it would fund school construction. As a matter of fact, I believe it was kind of sold that way. It simply isn't true. So out of all of the revenue that's come from marijuana this year, the entire revenue that's being devoted to school district construction is somewhere in the range of $40 million. That's it for the whole state. So you see the cost of these schools, that'll barely build one elementary school in the state. So what's happening is that money gets funneled to what is called the BEST program. I don't know what the acronym stands for, something about building, and it is designed primarily for charter schools to be able to access funding for school buildings, and also critical needs across the state. So imagine a small district in a rural area, and they have no ability to bond their community to fix a roof, but their roof's about to come down, and they can apply to that grant and get a new roof. So it's primarily being used for that type of work. So in a community like ours, maybe we could get one HVAC system. So what we've decided to do, though, and this has changed since when we first talked about this a year ago, is we've decided to go ahead and put an application in. All they can say is no. We think it's likely they'll say no, but we've decided to go ahead and try. And so we have a small application in for, mostly they focus on life safety types of work. So we're asking for the cost of some of the upgrades to our fire alarm systems. And it's a very small amount of money compared to this, but every dollar would help. So we are putting an application in.
Okay, we're going to shift gears a little bit. There's a question or a comment requesting that staff makes it more clear about who served on the long-range planning group and where to find the different plans and the differences. And so maybe we can do that later online on psdschools.org.
Okay.
Okay, so we're shifting to transportation a little bit. Will you consider eliminating or reducing student parking and requiring all students to take the bus because it will reduce capital costs and operational costs while benefiting the environment? Gasoline cars replaced with cleaner natural gas buses.
At this time, no, and I don't know what proportion of our students actually ride. Do you happen to know that? So we have 15,000. You want to take that question?
Yeah, right now we have about 13,000 students that get transported every day across elementary, middle, and high school.
So that's out of 29-some thousand. So 13,000 ride. So that's an interesting statistic. And I think that what happens is with choice, we don't provide busing for choice. So we do have people who are choosing to go to a school on the other side of town, and we require that they transport their kid. So that's adding to some of the transportation, not a lot. But no, we haven't. The transportation system itself, of course, is expensive to operate. So is it a good idea environmentally? I would say yes, but financially, probably not.
Okay, there's a question here about traffic issues getting to and from French Field. There's a lot of it. And this attendant was wondering if there's been traffic studies for like a Prospect and I-25 issue.
That's a really good question. We have been working with the different municipalities around the Prospect site, and as a result of the snowstorm a few weeks ago, a meeting did get canceled. It has been rescheduled, but it's working with Colorado Department of Transportation, Timnath, the City of Fort Collins, as they take a look at what the transportation needs may be. And it's pretty high level at this point, but just to try to look at development costs as the widening of Prospect, interchanges at Prospect and County Road 5, potential roundabout at the frontage road that just east of I-25. So those discussions are occurring, yes.
Great. Has there been discussion about having every high school have turf and lights and not centralized?
Yes, yes and no. We are actually, and I forgot to mention it, part of the improvements to the existing schools is to make sure that each high school has one turf field, synthetic turf field, that we would not build them all at once, but over time, as the money becomes available, we would add so that each school would have one, specifically so that they could overplay that field. That's the reason for synthetic turf, is that you don't have to worry about killing the grass, and you don't have to worry about weather making it all muddy. So, so you can just keep playing it and just schedule it back to back to back to back. So the plan does include that each school would have one of those, but the actual stadium, restrooms, concession stand that you need for the big competitions, we still only want to have now 2 regional ones, if that makes sense.
Okay, I hope it's okay. We're going to go back to transportation, a late breaking question. Can you contract out bus maintenance to the facility plan?
I believe during the recession, some work was done to see if indeed that would be cheaper.
Yeah, and actually we do have contract bus service. We have our own in-house service, and then there's other specialty items and larger jobs that we do contract for outside maintenance to be done on. So it's kind of a blend at this point in time, and we do transportation maintenance at a south facility. In the north, majority of it, as Dr. Smyser indicated, is planned for a new, improved, modernized north facility. But we still would use contract services at times. We use contract services for tires, and so there is a blend there existing.
Okay, great. There's a question here about schools on the north side. If they're not at capacity, has it been looked at to close them down?
We actually, I think the last time that the long-range plan was updated, there were several schools on the closure list. We specifically and intentionally decided not to put any of them on the closure list this time, or to make a closure list, because growth is coming so fast and it's coming kind of everywhere a little bit. And so we thought it was premature to do that, which isn't to say that we wouldn't do that in the future, but a perfect example is Riffenburg. Riffenburg was on the list last time for closure. They are one of our most crowded schools right now. We're having to move programs out of there because they are so crowded they can't hold even just their neighborhood kids. So what happens with growth is it comes in phases, and unfortunately our planner was not able to make it tonight. He could have given you a better description, but neighborhoods flip. Neighborhoods have mostly seniors or people whose kids are grown. They start moving out. New young families move in with lots of little children, and pretty soon the elementary school's packed to the gills. That's what has happened just in the last 7 years to Riffenburg. So we're looking at, as we look forward, it's too hard to guess. If you get out about 8 to 10 to 15 years, you're really beginning to prognosticate rather than actually plan based on numbers. And so it's very likely that we will have to be updating our long-range plan well within the next 10 years to include moving those middle schools out of the high schools, probably maybe building a couple elementaries. And at that time, we will have a better sense for what has happened in Midtown and North, whether it's filled back up or whether it really looks like it's not ever going to. So I think those decisions are better made at the next round.
Okay, there's a question about the architecture and energy systems of new buildings, and the fact that Fort Collins is very progressive and leading edge community around climate action goals, and what kind of research has been done to look at a net zero or net positive design, why and why not?
I happen to have Pete here. He loves this question. He's very proud of our work.
You know, that's another good question. As we move forward, all our systems continue to improve. And for those of you who've been around when we opened Fossil Ridge and Kennard and Bethke and Bacon, we work and we still work with what's called an integrated design approach. And with that, we try to improve on each of the building systems. And it involves everybody from the custodian to the architects to the consultants. And we continue to do that at this point. To quite reach a net zero goal at this time, I can't say where we're at in the design process other than we have just started discussions now to start looking ahead for the new buildings, what types of systems are out there, starting to do our research ahead of time, and what is part of that still integrated approach but becomes affordable, efficient, effective for occupant comfort, for lighting, for day lighting. As you know, as Poudre School District's been recognized for a lot of the innovative features, a lot of those are somewhat mainstream now. And so we still incorporate those, but what are some of the next components of that architecture, that mechanical systems, the lighting systems that we will incorporate? We still haven't gotten to that fine level of detail yet.
Okay, another question on building maintenance and deferred maintenance debt. The question addressed how do we get in a $500 million debt of maintenance, and then why are we building new schools, and how are we going to fund ongoing maintenance of new schools and the deferred debt of existing schools?
Well, you're right, $500 million is the amount when you add up all of the requests from the occupants and the facilities department on our existing schools. Now, keep in mind that that's everything. So that's grounds, that's athletic facilities, that's asphalt, that's sidewalking, roofs, HVAC systems, all of it. So when you have buildings that are decades and decades old, that list is never going to go away. So I think it is not wise to think about that list of 500 million that we could just knock away at it and it wouldn't fill back up from the other end, because buildings will continue to age. So, but I would say that even our last bond is, we're still finishing up those projects, and they were all focused on our existing schools. That work has gone very well. But the needs continue and the buildings continue to age. Occasionally, school districts will close an old building and replace it with a new building. Essentially, that's what we're planning to do with Wellington Middle School. So there is one of those in here where the cost of continuing to upgrade an old building just doesn't make sense. It's time to just build a new one. But those decisions have to be made very carefully and over time. So right now, this is the mechanism we have to work on our existing buildings, is to ask our community for bonding.
Great, we have some more building and land questions, but there's this one question about taxes I just want to get to, and then
Sure.
we'll go back to building. And that is, do Timnath residents pay taxes to the school district?
They absolutely do. If you live in PSD school district, your tax bill says taxes for PSD. You can see it right on there. So if you live within that huge boundary, you pay taxes to us.
Okay, great. Here's a question. As Fort Collins grows up with taller buildings and downtown infill and midtown infill, will schools grow up or out, and who pays for that, and how do those decisions get made?
In terms of the construction of the school itself?
Yes.
Well, let me first say that as buildings go up in town, that's also one of the reasons that we don't want to close our north schools at this point in time, because if we continue to go up and have more occupants living in the northern regions of town because of that phenomenon, we may see more and more children coming in up there as well. But in terms of designing schools as multi-level, at this point we have just 2-story buildings. Have you had conversations about going taller?
Actually, we have not. I know some of the questions have asked about adding extra stories to some of our existing buildings, and we're not looking at doing that. And Dr. Smyser's right. We have the new construction is 2 stories, and actually code requires in the elementary level that first, pre-kindergarten through 2nd grade, I believe, Tammy, I think that's correct, have to be on a ground floor anyway. So you put that second tier on, and the buildings, even at a 2-story, reduce the building footprint, and yet allow for good occupant flow through the building. So we're just looking at the models, Fossil Ridge and the Bethke or ZAC model for the elementary school. So that's what we're looking at. We do have one 3-story, I believe it's Centennial.
Right. If you think about cities that are big cities, right, you have no land at all, and so you don't want to use any of your footprint and lose any little bit of play space that you have. And so you'll see, if you're downtown San Francisco, schools that are, just stuck in and have no field space. And hopefully we won't get to that point where all of our schools are jammed inside. It's hard to imagine Fort Collins being that big. But if land begins to get more and more and more scarce, that may be an option that we will have to consider.
Great. And to the building and construction of the new facilities, are you currently working with architects, engineers, or consultants on designs, costs, and cost-saving strategies, for example, contracting arrangements with design build or construction managers?
Yes. You wanted to address that? Yes, we are.
Yeah, that is a great question, yeah. And we currently are right now, because the architects that designed the Fossil Ridge model and the ZAC model are under the impression we're going to continue to work with them because they hold the copyright to those schools, and we'll continue to work with them because there's efficiencies to be gained in continuing to work with the architectural teams of those buildings, which helped us devise the costs. And I think that was a great multifaceted question, because all those parts of that we're looking at right now with how we deliver the construction mechanism, the architects that are on board. So we're looking at those costs, and that helped us formulate that number that we're looking at right now.
And we have, at least for the past several construction, and we're planning going forward to use the CMGC process.
Great. And how will new staff assist with design of the buildings? That was something mentioned earlier, that staff is hired earlier to help with some of that. It sounds like prototype schools, which exist already, staff input on design, maybe they should be used more for curriculum, staff hours.
Yes, and I should emphasize that we're not going to hire like the whole high school staff a year ahead of time. We're going to hire the administrative staff, and then they will begin to select those people. That doesn't mean they will leave their jobs at the time and come to begin just designing curriculum for a whole year. So we'll identify who they are, do the interview processes, and select them, but they will still be working wherever they're working for the rest of the year. So we'll be able to pull them in for working groups and conversations, but they're not going to be, please don't misunderstand, we're not going to hire an entire high school staff and have them just think about a school for a whole year.
Okay, we have some boundary questions as well. So this question is, will students from Windsor, Wellington, and Timnath leave Fossil and Preston for the new high school?
So we had a boundary committee meet. By any chance, was anybody on the boundary committee? We had all community members on the boundary committee. They met for several months. They they did some cleanup for us of some of our existing boundaries. For example, that was really helpful. For example, we had some boundaries that went through empty fields that are no longer empty fields. So we literally had a boundary that was running through someone's house because the house didn't exist when the boundary was set. So we had just some cleanup that was done that made sense, and they did a great job. And then they looked at each new school that we're proposing and what should the boundary be for that new school. So they have designed, and I've accepted their decision. They worked really hard on it. The boundaries make sense. They follow natural places. They kept in mind train, transportation, major roads, where's the entrance to the neighborhood, what makes sense, which kids should go to those schools. Those boundaries are posted on our website, so you can take a look. At one point we had maps up here, and I think it's easier to actually just get online and zoom in and see which exact street are you interested in. So those proposed boundaries are on the website. The only boundary changes that we're proposing this time are for the new schools. So the kids and neighborhoods that will be scooped up to go to a new school are the only ones that got a boundary change.
So there's a question about maps, so that's good. Maps are available online at psdschools.org. And there's a question about when the implementation might happen. When would this change occur?
So timelines. Who wants to do timelines? For
Time-
opening of the schools?
Yeah, timelines for the opening of the schools. The elementary school is anticipated to open the fall semester of 18-19, and then the two middle school, high schools are anticipated to open the fall semester of 2021.
Great. So those are all the paper questions we have this evening. If you have any questions from home, again, you can email them to info@psdschools.org. At this time, is there anybody that wants to say anything
Final
else?
statement? Anything from Community Facilities Advisory? No? Okay. Anybody want to add anything? Would you like to describe briefly what CMGC is? This is the management process that we use when we do new construction. I was thinking that was the acronym I threw out there. Sorry about that.
Sure. CMGC is a delivery method for a construction project. It stands for Construction Manager as General Contractor. All that means is that you enter into agreement with the contractor during design with the architectural team and the design team. So everyone's at the table at the beginning. They do feasibility studies. We have cost estimates that are actual from subcontractors as we move along, instead of a typical design bid build where you don't have a number until the documents go out to bid and the contractors have time then to put a number to it. So the designer is involved, the contractor's involved from day one, and then they give a number when we reach construction documents. Excuse me. And then the district has an opportunity at that time to either carry the contractor forward for construction, or if we call it a GMP, the gross maximum price or guaranteed maximum price, if it's not in line with our budget or with our plan at that time, it gives us the opportunity to start over again. We either can go out to bid at that point or start over with another CMGC. So we get the benefit of their expertise and their experience, their numbers, their involvement during design. So it's a good delivery method. It saves design time, and it's typically a cheaper way to do a project.
Thanks. So next steps going forward for you. You need to know where the website is and where to look. So on the front page of the website, there's a section on the right that says, what's it titled? Special projects? Focus projects. So click in there, and then you can find Long Range Plan. There is a huge amount of information in there, including maps, videos of meetings like this, Q&A, question answer things. After we're done with the last session like this, which is early next week, we will be collecting and sorting all of the questions and answers that we've gotten at all of them, and all the questions and answers will be posted there. So if you have something you want to look back up, you can find it there. Also, if you just have a brilliant question as you drive away and think, I should have asked it, send it to info@psdschools.org, because we're watching for those, and we will either email you back the question immediately or the answer immediately, or add it to our list and add the answer at the end. All right. So thank you very much, and don't be shy. We'll hang out here if you have some questions, and let us know what else you're concerned about or you're thinking about later. Thank you.